Alrighty, everybody, it is currently Monday, June 2nd, 2025, and I'm coming at you live. And I got some unfortunate news. The goat did unfortunately pass away. My dog died yesterday. You know, probably one of my favorite, probably the favorite as of right now. Current power rankings, we got her at the number one slot, but this is early days. You know what I mean? This is like the NBA in the 60s. She might be a little bit of a Wilt Chamberlain. Like, yeah, she's an all-time great, but we'll see some progression further down the line and someone will replace her. But as of right now, she is the number one. You know what I mean? She's Bill Russell, 11 rings. You can't, you just can't deny it. You know what I mean? So, and she did pass away. And the worst, the worst part about a dog dying, right, is that you don't get any sympathy pussy from it. That's the worst part, right? Because at least if your grandma dies, you can go to the bar and like be all dark and mysterious in like your funeral suit and like throw back a shot, some whiskey, just straight whiskey, no rocks. Some girl comes up, what's wrong with you? Don't worry about it. I loved her more than anything. And then your next thing you know, some blonde chick with dark eyebrows is giving you head in the back of a Nissan Altima. You know what I mean? But if you do that with a dog, it's like, why are you wearing funeral clothes for a dog? First of all, second of all, the thing was only going to live like 10 years in it. Let's calm down. So, and so now you're sad, right? You're sad because your dog died, your favorite dog died, and you're full of nut, dude. The two things I personally, I don't know about all men in life. I assume all men in life, the two things all men in life try to avoid: A, not being able to get your nut off, except for like the priests, and even those guys are fucking, we know they're not telling the truth about that at all, dude. Not one bit of truth in that statement that they fucking, the chastity or whatever they say, dude. Maybe they are holding their chastity vows. Maybe the chastity vow is I will not have sex with a woman. you know? So maybe the priests are still holding that vow, but the two things most men hate most in life is being full of nut and being sad. It's the two things, humans as a whole try to avoid doing, and you just got to deal with both of them. That's the worst part about a dog. That another shitty part about it is that like dogs are like it's almost like a kid, right? Like if an adult dies, it's like obviously you're going to be more sad because that's a actual person, but it's like at least you have some kind of like negative memory of that person somewhere in there. You can be like, but he was kind of a fucking asshole, so whatever. But with a dog, it's like, what he barked at me one time. Is that what you're gonna be angry at the dog about? So yeah, it's shitty. She did die though. Probably ate like a poison plant or something like that. We have no fucking idea, but she did pass away. We did bury her, and yeah, it's just sad news. Kind of you gotta fucking try to make some ways to turn it funny. The funny thing is, so me and my dad went down to bury her at our farm. Which, by the way, I was wondering, what do people in the suburbs do? Do they just like throw that thing in the fucking trash and have some black dude just pull up and throw it in the back of the fucking garbage truck? I don't know. But we went down to bury her down at the farm, and we get in my dad's truck, and the radio is like obviously playing in the truck, and it's fucking Slim Shady, dude. My dog just died. She's laying there, like stiff, very stiff. By the way, people say like when like an animal or a person dies, it shits itself. She didn't shit herself, but she fucking pissed everywhere. So we got a piss-soaked, stiff-ass dog in the back of the seat. We obviously didn't put her in the bed of the truck. That's just straight disrespect. If you're doing that, dude, disrespectful as hell. So we put her in the back seat and just Slim Shady. It was, will the real Slim Shady please stand up? And I was like crying, laughing, dude. And so then we like bury her and shit. We like fucking throw like half a ton of dirt, dude. That's the hardest part. I could never be a serial killer, dude. Burying a body is so fucking hard. I could never be a serial killer. I would just too much fucking work for me. And so we bury her and like we're driving back and like as soon as we get home, Get Low by Lil Jon starts playing. It was so fucking funny, dude. And I was like, yeah, she got low. She got fucking, 4 feet low. I don't know if the human parameters and the dog parameters are the same, but it was a decent sized hole. My dad dug it like the day before because obviously she was gonna die. They were like feeding her medicine, like she'll be okay. No, she couldn't. She couldn't move. She was like paralyzed for 2 days, and then she just died. But yeah, she passed away. Rest in peace. Yeah, I don't got much else to say about a dog dying. You know, it sucks, but there is it is funny, dude. Just a stiff body covered in piss. Will the real Slim Shady please stand up? Please stand up. It's funny. And just the amount of work it takes to bury a body. I don't know how they do it. Everyone talks shit about Jeffrey Dahmer and shit like that. He might have just been like eating those people because he buried one of them and he was like, "That's way too much fucking work, dude. I just gotta munch, I just gotta munch these guys and fucking throw the bone somewhere out because god damn is that too much work. I love killing people, but god damn is it fucking impossible to bury a body. So that's my theory about why Jeffrey Dahmer was munching people, dude. He was just sick and tired of picking up that fucking shovel. He was like, I'm not even getting paid for this, dude. That's at least my conspiracy theory. But today we're going to be talking about Bougainville. And a lot of people haven't heard of this before. I had heard of it like kind of a little bit because I'm like a one of those geography people. Like I play this shit called Sporkle, and like it's just like the dumbest quizzes on earth. Like everything about it is so dumb. It's like a Harry Potter logic quiz, but I play like the geography quizzes and stuff, and I'm out here like that's the flag of Malta, that's the flag of Kosovo, and so I've heard of Bougainville before. I don't know if a lot of people have. I didn't know they had a civil war though, which is what most of this episode, maybe like half, maybe, is going to be about. It's going to be about the Bougainville Civil War, and we're going to be talking about colonialism, and I'm ramped up about that, dude. I'm amped up. I'm ready to talk about colonialism, ready to own some people, and yeah, just talk about it. All right. So Bougainville. Most people haven't heard of it before. You're thinking maybe like somewhere in Europe, right? That sounds like a European thing, or somewhere where like white people live. No, Bougainville is an autonomous region of Papua New Guinea. And if you don't know Papua New Guinea, it's like the island that's that little kind of sharp point, like the spear point of Australia. It's that island right up there, right? It's the one they share it with Indonesia. Half the island is Indonesia, and then half the island is Papua New Guinea. And I'm going to be calling it PNG because I guess that's what people call it. I was watching a video about it, and they kept talking about PNG, and I thought that was I thought it was like an oil company, right? Like a British oil company or some shit like that. But no, PNG is Papua New Guinea. It consists of two main islands. The Bougainville does. Buka, where the capital is, and then Bougainville, which is the largest and most populous island. And Bougainville Island also has Arawa, which is their biggest city, and it was at one point the provincial capital of Bougainville. And if you don't know, an autonomous region is like it's part of a country, but it has like a certain amount of like self determination and self rights. Like it's almost like it's kind of like a state, if that makes sense, right? Like every other country doesn't have states like America has states. Like in America, like states, you go from one to the other, it's completely different rules. And so that's kind of what an autonomous region is. And they kind of self-govern their own thing, right? Like every state in America has their own Congress and legislature and like Supreme Court, right? Like I live in Kansas. There's a Kansas Supreme Court. There's a Kansas legislature. There's a Kansas Congress within the state, and then obviously there's congressmen that work with the federal government. And so I think that's kind of what an autonomous region is. But it's kind of some bullshit, right? It's like we don't want to give this up, so we're just gonna call them an autonomous. I feel like it's one of those sort of things, right? It's like when you give your a little kid a controller and be like, yeah, you're playing the video game now. I think that's what an autonomous region is. And there is also there's Buka. I have horrible handwriting. Can't say if that says Baka or Buka. I'm gonna go with Buka because I can't say Baka, dude. I hate anime shit too much. So there's Buka and then there's Bougainville Island. And then there's a number of smaller islands. And we're going to talk about this a little bit. So Bougainville is populated mostly by Christian Melanesians who do not share the same tribal divisions as like mainland Papua New Guinea. It's kind of weird calling an island the mainland, but in this situation it is. And so if you don't know, Papua New Guinea or PNG is they have like 700 tribes there, right? And every single tribe, it's like so rural and so remote that they all speak different languages. And so there's like these crazy tribal divides. Even within the city, the biggest city I think is called Port Moresby, and it has like 500,000 people. Like this is a legit fucking city, a legit big city, and the tribal divisions like still exist there, right? It's almost like it's kind of like gangs almost, but it goes back hundreds, thousands of fucking years. And so, but Bougainville doesn't really have that. They're all kind of chilling with each other, right? When you're on a big island like that and it's like everyone can have their own pocket, then you can start to beef with people. But in Bougainville, it's a little bit smaller. So the beef can't exist there, dude. You need you need a ranch if you're gonna have beef, you know what I mean? And so they don't have the same, like, tribal divisions, and I think that's part of the reason why they wanna be independent. They're like, "Dude, you guys are fucking always killing each other, always fighting and shit. We don't wanna be a part of that." And like I said about the smaller islands, and even on, I think it's Buka, there's, like, Polynesian people, and what a Melanesian person is they kinda look like black people, but they're a little bit different, right? They're basically just darker people who live like a Polynesian lifestyle, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? They're climbing trees, eating eating coconuts, whatever the fuck else Polynesians do. But they're very skinned and they have like very short curly hair. And that's actually how Papua New Guinea got its name. Because Guinea was I think it was a colony at the time in Africa. And these people, they were like, oh, these are just black people, right? Like they have dark skin and short curly hair. And so we're going to call it New Guinea. And then I think Papua is a dude. I don't know. And so the main island was first found by Louis Antoine de Bougainville, a French admiral. And so they kind of discovered some of like the outlying islands a little bit earlier, but he discovered the big one, dude. He discovered Bougainville. And like there was a ton of tribes. I think there's like 20 different there's at least 20 different languages within the region of Bougainville, and so there had to be at least 20 different tribes. So he was just like, dude, you guys got 20 different fucking names for this island. We're just going to call it Bougainville. I mean, it's a pretty sick name. I think it rolls off the tongue pretty easily. I think Bougainville would be a little bit better, but Bougainville is pretty good. So if Bougainville does gain independence, though, and I looked this up, it would be the second country named after a Frenchman, and the first is the Seychelles. And if you don't know, the Seychelles is like they're these islands in the Indian Ocean that are technically part of Africa, and I guess Seychelles was a dude or something like that. So it would be the second one named after a dude. And like that type of region, like I said, Papua is a dude, and then there's the Solomon Islands and the Marshall Islands, and each of those I think are named after a dude. The dude's got countries named after him. Even America technically is named after a dude, Amerigo Vespucci, who was a Spanish explorer or Portuguese, something like that. He's the one who actually discovered mainland America. Like fucking people talk about how Columbus discovered America. He discovered like the Bahamas, which are pretty sick, dude. Like if I was a dude in like the 1500 or I guess late 1400s, early 1500s, and I just lived like a shitty life in like Portugal or Spain or Italy or wherever the fuck he lived, I'd be like, dude, I'm not going past the Bahamas. This is fucking paradise. You're telling me I have guns and I can just kill all these dudes and live here? I'd be doing the same thing. So I don't blame Columbus for not going to mainland America, but mainland America was discovered by Amerigo Vespucci. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the colonial history, or I guess a fair bit about the colonial history of Bougainville and a little bit about Papua New Guinea. So Bougainville was annexed by Germany in 1886. And people don't know, Germany had colonies. I think Tanzania and Zanzibar were both colonies. And I guess, you know, Tanzania is a country in Africa, and it's actually a combination of the names Zanzibar and Tanganyika. And I think both of those were German colonies. And then there's Namibia, which used to be called Southwest Africa, which is also a German colony. So the Germans, they kind of fucked it up for themselves a little. I don't know if you guys are intimately familiar with the history of Germany, but those guys, they fucked it up. They could have had it all. They had all these fucking, and Bougainville's a beautiful, beautiful fucking place, dude. It's crystal clear ocean. It's basically like Fiji or Bora Bora or some shit like that. So they really fumbled the bag with this one. But they had colonies and they were chilling a little bit. So in 1844, Germany and the UK had negotiated and established colonies splitting what is now Papua New Guinea. And so the British had like the northern half and the Germans had the lower half. And this tells you how remote and like how treacherous the terrain of Papua New Guinea is that even England, you know, the UK, like the ultimate colonists, everyone knows they're like the best at colonizing. Even they couldn't really like settle Papua New Guinea like that. They did spread Christianity a fair bit, but they really couldn't get in there. And so if the British couldn't colonize it, I don't think anyone else could have. And so they had that going on. And then the annexation of Bougainville was part of negotiations regarding the Solomon Islands archipelago. And so the Solomon Islands, this is going to be important later in the story, is like just south of Bougainville, right? It's just like, I don't know, like 20 miles of like ocean in between Bougainville and the Solomon Islands. And so the Solomon Islands got colonized by the British, and then the Germans got Bougainville as like part of the deal about that archipelago. And so the formed boundary between the British Solomon Islands and Bougainville was not drawn until 1899. And they were not getting over there. They were not. You imagine like the Germans and the British like both visited the area and they were like, "All right, we're gonna get this, and you guys are gonna get that." That's not really what happened. They just like looked at it on a map and they were like, "Yes, that looks good. I want to live on those islands. I could make many resorts for white people to go to." That's just how they did it. They were just looking at a map, being like, "What's going on over there? We want this one. You guys get this one." And they really didn't do too much to colonize it. So the first visit by a German, by the German administration occurred in 1888. So 2 years after it officially became a colony of Germany is when it was first visited by like a German official. I'm sure that there was other Germans that were like, yeah, Germany fucking sucks, dude. It's flat and it's gray and it's there's nothing going on over here. I'm gonna go over there. But the German government didn't really go until 1888. So the German New Guinea Company was given control of the islands in 1886. And this was like the setup back then. I think maybe the Dutch were the first people to do it. Is like you make like a company which is controlled by the government, and then the government tells like the company what to do. And so, like, people talk about how the British colonized India. It really wasn't like the official UK government and the official UK, military doing that, the official UK Navy and shit like that. It was actually the British East India Company that did it. So it's weird like that. But you can just look at it kind of like an extension of the government, right? Like the government is just you guys kind of do your own thing, you guys make your own money, and you kind of report to us. It's that kind of setup. So they were given control of the islands in 1886. And also, they were given control, obviously, of their part of Papua New Guinea. And so a native police force was founded by the Germans in 1888. That's like the first thing they set up. And the funny thing about it is they didn't give these guys like muskets or I guess at that point in history they had like repeating guns and shit like that. They didn't give them guns. They were just like let them have their bows and arrows still. So they set up a native police force. And until 1908, the colony was mostly a source for labor for plantations on New Guinea. So this was just they were just nabbing dudes from here, dude. It was basically fucking aliens. It was basically the Germans came down in like the equivalent of a UFO and just snagged these dudes up and put them on like I don't know, fruit plantations, spice plantations, sugar plantations on the mainland of Papua New Guinea. And the Germans started establishing plantations in the 1910s and mostly just collected taxes from the colony from the colony. That was the setup, right? And that's like kind of the difference between how England did it and how everyone else did it, right? Everyone else was just like, we're gonna send a few white dudes over there with guns, and they're just gonna like make all these dudes slaves, and they're gonna have plantations, or they're gonna, have like mines, or they're gonna go out there and like kill elephants for ivory and shit like that, and we're just gonna collect money from that. That's not how the British did shit. I'm sure that kind of is how they did in Papua New Guinea and the Solomon Islands, but basically everywhere else they like actually sent people to like settle the land and like really colonize it and really get like a strong European presence there. But that's not really how everyone else did it. Sorry, I had to burp. And so the Germans they established those plantations, and the British followed suit. And so it kind of like exploded with like commercial activity and shit like that. And so of the Europeans in the colony, 1/3 were missionaries, and this is one of those things where it's like I'm sure some of the missionaries had good intentions, but the rest were just kind of like trying to get them to like Europeanize, if that makes sense. Get them to be like, oh, Europe, they know everything. They brought like this religion here, and so they know what the fuck is up. And so now the natives are going to work for the Europeans. But 1/3 were missionaries, and this is kind of weird because you imagine like Germany is where the Protestant Revolution happened, like or the Protestant Reformation, I guess it's called. That's where that happened. But these were mostly Catholic missionaries over there, and so like I said, uh, Bougainville now is like they're mostly Catholic. I think it's like 80% Catholic over there. So after World War One, obviously, obviously the Germans decided to fight the rest of the world, and the world was like, no, you can't have colonies over there, and they fucked up Germany like completely. Like Germany was completely fucked up, and so they lost their colonies, and so Australia was given control of the colony by the League of Nations. And if you don't know what the League of Nations is, it was basically like the shitty predecessor to to the UN, right? Like you can kind of look at it as like White Castle and McDonald's. Like obviously, if you don't know, White Castle was like the first like fast food burger restaurant, but McDonald's really perfected it. And White Castle's still around. People still like White Castle. People still talk about White Castle, but it's just not McDonald's. The UN is McDonald's and the League of Nations was White Castle. And at this time, Australia was like I I was trying to get like a idea of it. it wasn't technically a colony of the British anymore, but it kind of was. So what the setup was is that Australia could like govern itself, but all its international relationships were controlled by the British. And so I don't know how that works in this context. I imagine the British still had a fair bit of sway over what Australia could and couldn't do. So it was basically controlled by the British via Australia at this point. And Australia continued to rule the same way the Germans did, but reduced violent pacification and only intervened during violent conflicts. And so what the Germans did is like basically whenever anyone fucked up, they would send in the native police force to go and fuck those guys up. But the Australians were like, no, we're not doing that. They followed the British playbook, and that's why the British colonized the rest of the world. They were like, no, we're not just gonna kill everyone who like fucks us over. We're only gonna kill them if they really start to get active, and that's what Australia did as well. And violent pacification is obviously you don't want to be Catholic or whatever, we're just going to fucking kill you. And the Australians didn't do that. And so, under Australian rule, violence, ceremonial cannibalism, and headhunting reduced dramatically. And if you don't know, like Polynesia, Melanesia, those areas, they were chopping off heads, eating eyeballs. Like in Fiji, cannibalism existed until like the 1950s, and Bougainville really isn't that different. Maybe not until the 1950s, but they still had cannibalism going on. And it wasn't like they weren't just like eating dudes for like meat. You know what I mean? There was like a big fat black lady with fat arms, like throwing a dude on the grill and hitting him with some sauce and shit. It was like, no, we killed like the chief of this other tribe and we're gonna eat his eyes or his heart or his lungs or whatever the fuck. And the Australians were like, no, no, you're not. You're not going to do that anymore. And so that kind of reduced. And I think I watched this video of these dudes in Bougainville, and they said maybe, I think it was his great great grandfather, like 8 people, who was munching on dudes. And so I'm trying to do the math in my head. So that was probably like the 1910s, around when Australia got control of Bougainville. So during the 1920s, Methodist and Seventh day Adventist missionaries began arriving in the colony. And so that's where the rest of the 20% kind of comes into play as being Protestant, whereas the other 80% is Catholic. And the Catholics, obviously the Catholics come out on top, dude. Catholicism, something about it, dude, just makes it the ultimate colonial religion. I don't know. Like if you look at Central America and like South America and shit like that, they're all fucking Catholic. Same with West Africa. Like a lot of West Africa is like very, very Catholic. I don't know. They just had it figured out, and I'm sure the British weren't like too interested in spreading their religion. They were like, "No, dude, we're just gonna take all the shit these guys have. We're not gonna give them. Who cares? Who cares what god they worship? As long as we get our sugar cane and ivory." So obviously, the Catholics came out on top. And then in 1942, so it's about 20 years of Australian rule, the Japanese occupied Bougainville and mostly used it as a base. This was the base they used during the Battle of Guadalcanal, which was a major battle in the Pacific during World War II, and this was like their base of operations for that. And so the Americans invaded in 1943, and from 1943 until 1945, and this is crazy. Like I say Bougainville is the big island within the autonomous region. It's not that fucking big. Like it's really not that big. 17,500 Japanese soldiers died in Bougainville. Some died due to combat, others died due to disease, and I'm sure there was a few dudes that like cut their bellies open and shit, but still 17,500 people, and I imagine they were mostly on like the main island of Bougainville. And also Buka, the other main island, is like right next to Bougainville Island. And so 17,500. And by the way, for modern context, I think only like 400,000 people live in the autonomous region now. So there's just 17,500 fucking dead Japanese dudes like on these islands. And in April 1943, Admiral Isoroka Yamamoto was shot down during Operation Vengeance in Bougainville, which, god damn, dude, we use all the good names for the operations. I think the sickest name since Operation Vengeance is maybe Operation Gothic Serpent, which is what was when if you've ever seen Black Hawk Down, that's what Black Hawk Down was. It was Operation Gothic Serpent. I think that is the sickest name since Operation Vengeance, but I feel like we burned up a lot of good ones in World War II when we didn't necessarily need to. But yeah, Yamamoto, he was the guy who set up the whole Pearl Harbor thing. He was Yeah, and obviously the biggest battleship in history, I don't know if you guys know this, is named after Yamamoto. The Japanese just made like this thing. You got to look up pictures of this thing. It looks so fucking sick. It's fucking huge. I saw a picture of like one of the turrets they had on the boat next to a tank, and the tank was like it looked like a dude standing next to the turret. This thing was fucking gigantic. And so Yamamoto, this must have been a tough blow for the Japanese dude because he got shot right the fuck down over like a very rural area of Bougainville, and you can still visit the plane and shit. And so after World War II, Papua New Guinea and Bougainville were returned to Australia. And so I guess Australia, administered all of Papua New Guinea, not just the British part. They administered all of it and Bougainville as well. So independence/civil unrest. So Australia attempted to implement a head tax, which resulted in clashes in 1962. So they tried to do it in 1959, and the civil unrest started in 1962. And what a head tax is, it's a tax on all people that all people have to pay, regardless of like income or working status. And this is obviously like the early 1960s, so a lot of these dudes are probably getting paid the like slave money basically. It was a bunch of chicken Georges running around over there. Like they did not have that much money, so they were like fuck no. And I don't know if kids have to pay it, right? Like I think it might just be like people 18 and above have to pay this head tax, but still, they were like, no, dude, we're already basically slaves for you guys. We're not gonna pay you guys fucking taxes on top of that. So they were beefing with the Australians a little bit. And this is Papua New Guinea was also still like a colony or, controlled by the Australians at this point in time. And a lot of these places, people talk about colonialism and they think of like America and they think of like 1776, maybe like into the 1800s. Colonialism really hasn't ended. Like France's the longest border that they have is with Brazil because they have a colony in South America called French. I don't know if it's French Guyana or French Guinea. It's something like that. But colonialism still exists. And the French also have a colony in Melanesia called New Caledonia. That doesn't relate to any of this, but colonialism is still really going heavy. I'm sure it's not as exploitative because you know, you just can't do that anymore. But certain types of it's just more sneaky colonialism now. Colonialism still exists in Africa and like Papua New Guinea and these regions and shit. They're just a little more sneaky about it. They're just like, no, it's kind of a similar setup, right? Like the Chinese are very big in Africa right now. They're basically colonizing Africa for themselves. And what they do is they send over companies, right? And that's like a similar setup here because we talked about the German New Guinea company being sent over to like control the region and get the sugar and the spices and whatever the fuck else they were getting out of New Guinea. And so the Chinese are basically doing that in Africa right now. So colonialism still exists. People just, I don't know, they just don't want to fucking deal with it anymore. You know what I mean? It was like a 500-year period of like struggles and shit. And people are just like, we're done with that. And a lot of people talk about the Chinese colonialism and they're like, oh, the Chinese, they're like building roads and hospitals for these people. And that's the same justification that the Europeans used. So it's the exact same shit that's going on as it was when the Europeans did it 500 years ago. They're sending over companies to exploit these places. Yeah, they're building a few roads and hospitals and shit like that, but it's really not worth it for the people that are getting colonized. And so, yeah, colonialism still exists in every form. I don't know. That was just a little rant I wanted to go on. So remember, Bougainville is still under Australian rule. Sorry. In 1969, Australian mining company Rio Tinto Zinc began drilling in Panguna mine in Bougainville. And this company, I was looking into it a little more. It's technically a British company, Rio Tinto Zinc. I think maybe Rio Tinto is like the main company that exists in Britain, and then Rio Tinto Zinc is the Australian like subsidiary of that. And technically, Rio Tinto Zinc wasn't drilling in Bougainville. It was Bougainville Mining Company, but by Bougainville Mining Company is owned by Rio Tinto Zinc. So it's basically just a British company is mining in Panguna mine in Bougainville at this point. And Panguna mine is believed to have 1 billion metric tons. And so a metric ton is 2,240 pounds of copper ore and 12 million ounces of gold. This thing could turn Bougainville into like Dubai or the UAE or some shit like that, or like Qatar or Bahrain or Saudi Arabia. This place could be turned into that if they really get active. If they get their independence and they get like a good setup going, it could become like one of those paradises like that. And it's a beautiful island paradise in the Pacific Ocean. Like I said, it's like Fiji or Bora Bora or whatever the fuck else you want to talk about. And so secessionist movements began after Bougainville sued Australia for not receiving proper compensation for the mine. In Australia, I think this was the same setup as Papua New Guinea. So Australia was getting 20% of the profits from the mine, whereas the autonomous region of Bougainville was only getting half a percent to maybe like 1.25%. So 40 to 20 times less what the Australians were getting at this time. And so they were like, fuck no, you need to give us this shit. And the Australians are like, nah, we're not giving it. You guys are still fighting with bows and arrows and shit, dude. We have machine guns. We're not giving you that shit. All right. You guys are just going to be slaves in this mine. And also another thing about the mine is that it was like an apartheid system where it was like a small white minority controlled the Melanesian majority. And so they were also pissed about that shit too. And so the colony normally would have won the case, right? Like I said, they sued Australia and it went to, I think, the Australian version of the Supreme Court. Normally, Bougainville will have won that case, but it lost because they were a colony, right? If that makes sense. The Supreme Court was basically like, yeah, if you guys were actual Australians, you would have won this case 100%. Like, this is 100% bullshit. It's very unfair. You would have won it. But unfortunately, you're a colony, which is, it's just like, it's the stupidest thing you could have said in that moment, right? Like, what they should have done is they just should have been like, no, you lost. But instead, they were like, no, you guys are a colony. That's why you lost. And so obviously, they're going to be like the Bougainville people, the Bogans are going to be like, no. They're just going to get more pissed. It was a very stupid move by the Australians, but that's the colonial mindset. They're like, nah, we can fuck these dudes up. We can like literally tell them whatever we want. We can tell them we're superior. We can tell them that they'll never be like us and there's nothing they can do about it. Well, there turns out there was something they could do about it. Turns out there was. In 1972, Australia gave Bougainville some autonomy, but tensions flared with PNG when two Bougainville public officials were killed in Papua New Guinea. And this was in retaliation. Or at least Bougainville believes that PNG killed these people in retaliation for like something they did. And so they were very, very pissed about that. And something they did that wasn't killing another public official, right? Because if it was tit for tat, it's like, that's just the game. You know what I mean? But Bougainville didn't view it as that. In 1974, Bougainville and PNG began negotiations regarding shares of mining profits, but this very quickly collapsed. They were like, "All right, what's the setup? What's going on here?" And then, and then obviously Papua New Guinea was like, they had that Australian mindset, that colonial mindset where they were like, "Yeah, you guys aren't going to do anything to us. We have like 12 million people. You guys have like 400,000. We're going to do whatever we want." That's basically what happened with these negotiations. And so Bougainville obviously once again was like, "Fuck off." These guys might be the most pissed anyone's been in history. First it was the Germans that came over and fucked them up and like, did violent pacifications, and then Australia took control and did the exact same thing basically. I said they did a little less, but still it's exploitative, it's extractive colonialism, sorry. And so they're just pissed. And then Papua New Guinea, they're like, finally, Melanesians, dudes who look like us. You guys are going to give us a fair deal, right? And Papua New Guinea was like, no, I don't think so. So these dudes, they might be the most pissed anyone's ever been in history. I'm sure there's some countries in Africa who have experienced a similar deal, but these guys just must be fucking so mad. Just so fucking pissed, just constantly gritting their teeth, just like, whoa, you fucking pieces of shit. These guys have got to be pissed. And so PNG declared independence in 1975, and from then on, Bougainville has tried to gain independence from them. And in 1975, this was a thing where it wasn't like when America declared independence and it was like a big surprise to the British. It was like, no, the British knew, or the Australians, I guess, at this point, they knew that they were like going to lose the colony. And they were like, it just is what it is. We're going to let these guys, we're going to help them, decolonialize and get their own setup going on. And while that was happening, Bougainville was like, all right, then we're going to declare independence too. And Papua New Guinea was like, nope, not how that works. You can't declare independence from us because you just can't. All right, it's different this time. I promise it's. I promise it's different this time. Papua New Guinea is kind of like the new boyfriend. It's like, oh, he's just so much better. He's gonna treat me better than him. He's just not gonna use me for my body anymore. No, dude, Papua New Guinea's horny as hell, and he wants that pussy. He wants it. He desires it. He needs it. And so this is a funny thing. So Papua New Guinea was like, all right, we're gonna declare independence on the 16th of September, I believe it was 1975. And then Bougainville was like, all right, cool, we're gonna do it on September 1st. And they were like, I bet you're not. I bet you're not. And so now this is the lead up to the Civil War. And so this independence, it was peaceful during this time. Tensions were high, but it was very peaceful from 1975 until basically the beginning of the war, the Civil War in 1988. So in 1988, cousins Francis Ona and Pepucha Sereno decided to take up arms against PNG. The conflict began over, Penguna mine, the big mine. It's got 12 million ounces of gold, a billion a billion metric tons of copper ore, dude. And if you don't know, copper's expensive, dude. I'm a big copper guy. Scrapping copper. I went to a scrapyard recently. We made about $4,000. Nothing too much. I got 550 of it. I gotta work on my negotiating skills, dude. I'm a little bit of a Bougainville right now. I'm a little bit of a Bougainville. But all right. So the tensions began over Paguna mine. Where was that? And so Bougainville were only receiving, like I said, it's the same setup that they had under the Australian administration, 0.5% to 1.25% of the profits, whereas PNG received 20%. In addition, the mine poisoned the Jaba River, or Juba River, I think it's called. It might be Jaba. I'm gonna go with Juba. I think it's a sicker name. It just that's just how it goes. I still have that European colonial mindset where I'm like, what do you guys call this place? That's a gay fucking name. We're gonna switch it up a little bit here. And so they weren't receiving shit from the mine basically, and a river got poisoned. And the main thing that they brought up is that Bougainville used to have these things called flying foxes, which if you don't know, they're like these huge giant bats that eat fruit and stuff. And they were like, the mine, like as soon as the mining started, all these things disappeared from the island, and they were just like, nah, has nothing to. I don't know what you schizophrenics are talking about here. Those two things are not correlated at all. Are you out of your mind? Oh, we started mining in 1969, and also in 1969, all these bats disappeared, and all like these genetic deformities started happening in children. What are you guys talking about? That's basically what Papua New Guinea did to Bougainville. They just completely denied it. And also at this time, the mine was still being mined by Rio Tinto, the mining company that exists in Britain. And so I think what the Papua New Guinea government did is they were like, yeah, just keep mining that. And instead of giving the money to Australia, give it to us. And so it's basically Papua New Guinea is doing the exact same thing that the Germans and Australians did to Bougainville, like I said earlier. And so Ona and Sereno were elected as leaders of the Panguna Landowners Association and demanded half of the mine's total profits since its opening in 1969. So the mine's basically been operating for 20 years, and they're like, we deserve half of that. You guys have poisoned these rivers. You've made all these animals go extinct. We need half the money. And I think Francis Ona, he was like a big environmental guy, And so I think what he wanted to do was like shut down the mine and then just get like half the money from it so that they could start to build their own country here. And obviously, I think this was a thing where it's like, we're gonna start high. You know what I mean? It's if you've ever seen Pawn Stars, it's like, Rick offers $2,000 for a thing that's worth $10,000, and the guy's like, no, give me $10,000, and they eventually end up getting like $7,000 for the thing. You know what I mean? A little less than what he should have gotten, but it's still a fair setup. And I think that's what Francis Ona and the Panguna Landowners Association were trying to do. And the Panguna Landowners Association had 3,500 people in it, and this is late 80s, so I imagine the population of Bougainville is maybe halved, if I had to guess. So it's probably like 200,000 people. So this is like a pretty decent chunk of people who are like, yeah, we're going to elect these guys as our leaders so that we can get money from this. This wasn't just two crazy people being like, hey, give us all the money, give us all the money. So it was a pretty, Bougainville was really behind these people at this point in time. They're going to not be so behind them later on, but at this time they are behind them. And so obviously this was denied by the PNG. They didn't even try to do negotiations, who was still supposedly acting under the thumb of Rio Tinto. Oh, and this is also interesting. I didn't write this down. I'm going to try to remember it as best as I can. So the prime minister of Papua New Guinea at the time, he was still the first prime minister that they had ever elected as an independent country. In 2001, I think, he signed like an affidavit, like a binding legal document that Rio Tinto Mining told him to not negotiate with Bougainville. And obviously Rio Tinto's like, no, that never happened. No. What are you talking about? That's not true. We did not do that. Are you out of your mind? Yes, we own and control the mine. Yes, this mine is probably worth billions and billions and billions of dollars. But no, we didn't. What are you guys talking about? No, we didn't. We didn't tell you guys to do anything. We could have lost that thing any day of the week and we wouldn't care. Obviously, they were like pushing the prime minister to do this. This is a very valuable mine. And Rio Tinto is, a company from a very rich, developed country at this point in time. And obviously, Papua New Guinea doesn't have the capacity to, operate the mine on their own. So they're still using Rio Tinto to do it and just getting their 20% from it. And so, yeah, I think that's complete bullshit. Rio Tinto obviously had that dude fucking, deny Bougainville their independence. And so in November 1988, the Bougainville Revolutionary Army, uh, which was, I guess, led by Francis Ona. It was technically led by another dude. Let me see if I can find the dude's name. It's like Kabuya, something like that. He was the actual military leader that led this raid on the Panguna mine, basically. And they pulled up on the mine and they started getting active, dude. They didn't get too active. They weren't like chopping off heads and shit like that. They blew a lot of shit up. They burned a lot of shit down, and they also stole explosives from the mine. And they stole those explosives and used them to blow up power pylons. And so, what a power pylon is, it's not like a telephone pole where it's like that little wooden stick. It's one of the big, huge metal ones that kind of looks like the Eiffel Tower. And they used explosives from that mine to blow up those power pylons that powered the mine. And that's a pretty fucking smart move by them, because obviously Rio Tinto probably has like mercenaries or some kind of armed guards and shit like that that are like special fucking forces, ex SAS, ex, whatever special force they have in Britain. And so they were like, yeah, we're not going to fight these dudes all one on one. We're just going to burn a little bit of shit down, kill a couple people, steal these explosives. And they took it down, right? It's like that mission in Call of Duty. I think it's Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, where you're trying to get into like the Russian base and you blow up that power pylon so it de-electrifies the fence and you can rush in and get it. That's basically what they did to this mine, but they weren't trying to go back into the mine. They were just trying to cut off power so that the mine couldn't operate, and they were basically like forced to leave. And so this was a pretty smart move by BRA, Bougainville Revolutionary Army, and that's how I'm going to refer to them. I might call them BRA, because BRA, you know, just calling like a revolutionary army bra. It's just something about that bra. And also, by the way, like I said, the Japanese and the Americans fought very intensely on this island, and so BRA, the Bougainville Revolutionary Army, they were armed with like World War II era weapons, mostly just like shit that was still like laying around the island. So that's pretty fucking impressive that they did like this to like this huge mining company that has like all the resources in the world. They did it with World War II weapons, basically. And so the BRA continued guerrilla attacks on PNG defense forces and mine workers. And guerrilla warfare, if you don't know, it's just hit and run, basically. It's just, we're just going to shoot at you real quick and then run back into the woods. We know how to, like, navigate this land, how to use, the terrain, the mountains, the rivers, and shit to our advantage. So we're just going to hit you, run back into the forest. And so that's what the BRA was doing to the PNG defense forces and mine workers. It was just like shoot a couple people and then dip real quick, because it's like, we're not going to beat you one on one. We have World War II weapons. We're not going to beat you one on one, so we're just going to hit you real quick and dip. It's what the Viet Cong did. It's what, the Taliban did. It's what ISIS did. You just hit them real quick and you dip. Ideally, you don't have to hit them at all, right? Like that's what ISIS did with all the IEDs and shit. It's just like you set up like this explosive, you blow it up when a convoy's going by, you never even get seen. Like that's the ideal type of guerrilla warfare. Just you never get seen. And I think that's the ultimate goal of all guerrilla warfare, is to just never be seen by anyone. I don't know if you guys can hear that. That's the vacuum going on in the background. We got a Roomba setup going on here. And like I said, my dog died. She used to fucking love attacking that thing, dude. So I'm sure the Roombas were happy about that, dude. Maybe the Roombas did it. Maybe the Roombas poisoned my dog. She kept attacking them, dude. The AI's had enough. The AI killed my dog. That's my conspiracy theory. And so, Bra's fucking the mine up, and the mine shut down in 1989 and withdrew all workers in 1990. And this was, I think it shut down in late 1889, and then in like March 1990, they took all the dudes out. And I'm sure like they were still there for like a few months to like clean it up and make sure they didn't leave any shit behind. And so they did it. ONA did it. The BRA did it. They got that mine shut down, but they didn't get their money from the mine. That's an important thing, because this mine, even like that 0.5% to like 1% of it, I'm sure that's still a decent chunk of money. And so they're like, we're not done, dude. We wanna operate this mine on our own, basically. That kind of seemed like their goal. Obviously, Francis Ona cared about the environment and shit like that, but he was also like, this place needs money. It's doesn't have like tourism and shit like that, like other Pacific islands. So we need the money from this mine. And obviously PNG is like, no, you're still under my control. I'm gonna fuck you up. And also the other chick, Sereno, I can't remember. I can't read my own fucking handwriting. She did end up dying at this point. And Ona's a dude. Francis Ona's a dude, and then Sereno's a chick, and she ended up dying at this time. Rest in peace, Sereno. She died of asthma, which is just it just goes to prove the Bougainville people's point that like we're not getting any money from the PNG government and like this mine isn't working. We want independence because this lady, who I imagine was very successful and probably a little bit rich, died of asthma in like the early 1990s. I don't know how old she was. She didn't look that old, like maybe 50s or something like that. So that kind of goes on to prove their point. So the mine shut down. And PNG at this point, Papua New Guinea, they're like, they're fucking, they're they're sick and tired of it, dude. They're sick and tired of their little stepchild that Australia made them govern, and they're like, we're gonna go in there and we're gonna fuck you up. And so PNG Army and police, led by Jerry Singarock, made several arrests but failed to find Ona. And so after the failed negotiations with the BRE, uh, okay, oh yeah. So at this point, the BRA or Bougainville, like politicians from there, are like going to Papua New Guinea to be like, all right, how do we end this conflict? How do we get this mine going again so everyone can get paid? And these negotiations, like very, very, once again, very quickly collapsed. And at this point, the BRA started receiving political support from Bougainville officials and from other people within the island after the negotiations failed. And so in 1989, John Bika, who was the Commerce and Liquor Licensing Minister, was assassinated by, we're assuming, the BRA. Some sort of like Bougainville resistance force killed this guy. So things are going on, dude. The guy who distributes the liquor, he ended up getting shot right in the back of the fucking head. You know what I mean? Luigi Mangione. Mangione pulled up on this dude and said, "We can't have a mine, then no one's getting alcohol," and they killed this guy. And I do think just the name, the Minister of Commerce and Liquor Licensing, if you just went with commerce there, I think people would like look at that as like more of a serious act, but it's like liquor licensing on top of that. It's like, I don't know. Something about that part of the name just makes it a little more goofy. And by the way, a little side note here. In Papua New Guinea and other, I think Indonesia as well, like that sort of area, alcohol really isn't that popular. They use this stuff called betel nut, which I don't know what the effects of it are. I think it's kind of like a little bit of like a toned down cocaine or amphetamine. It just kind of gets you going, gets you ready to go. It's and they chew on it. And so alcohol is not really that big there. The drug of choice is betel nut. And so I'm sure they just threw that guy like the liquor licensing thing on top of that because they're like, no one fucking here drinks, dude. I'm sure they do have a fucking minister of betel nut there because literally all the dudes and I think most of the chicks chew on it. It's very, very popular. All right. And so that guy got killed. And so a state of emergency was declared in the region, and the nation's police commander was appointed to the situation despite not even being there. He was in Port Moresby, which, like I said, it's the biggest city in Papua New Guinea. I think it's their capital. He was not in Bougainville, but he was appointed to lead the situation. And human rights abuses continued. And by the end of 1989, 1,600 homes had been destroyed by PNG troops or PNG police. 1,600 homes in Bougainville. And I think there was other human abuses, right? Because the Bougainville people would go out and like protest and be like, "Get the fuck out of here, we don't want you." I don't know. They probably had like some cool chant that they did in their language, which is probably way sicker than the chants the U.S. protesters use. You know, like I'm trying to think of the big ones. There's obviously "My Body, My Choice," which is the dumbest one. It's very stupid and it's also very annoying because it's all women and like cucks doing it. And all the dudes in Bougainville are jacked. Like they all work on like farms and shit. So they're all fucking huge. So probably a bunch of dudes like screaming some shit out. But over here it's like it's guys with like receding hairlines and like fucking pear-shaped bodies and like COVID masks still on being like her body, her choice. I'm sure Bougainville's was way sicker than that. And but the PNG forces were obviously having none of that, and they fucked them up for that. They fucked them up for the protesting, and obviously they were like, "All right, well, no one did anything then, so we're just going to keep going on." And eventually, PNG troops were pulled out, and the BRA agreed to disarm. And this didn't last very long. Spoiler alert, it's not just a one-year civil war. This didn't last very long. And after the withdrawal, PNG set up a blockade, causing ONA to declare independence and set up Bougainville interim government. And the funny thing about this, the Bougainville interim government didn't have like really any power at all. It was just Francis Ona still being like pissed at PNG and being like, "We got our own government. It's called big and it rules hard as fuck." And Ona would go on to live until 2005, and I don't know at what point he started calling himself like the Emperor of Bougainville. But at some point, Francis Ona just started calling himself the Emperor of Bougainville, just or like the king or something like that, which is just so funny. It's like, no, I didn't lose. I'm the king now. I didn't lose. What are you talking about? Yeah, you guys technically still like own us or whatever, but like we didn't lose, and I'm the king, and I rule hard as fuck, and I get all the bitches. So shout out Francis Ona. And so BIG or Big is the government, and it's you can kind of look at it as the same as the BRA, the Bougainville Revolutionary Army. So at the same time, gangs associated with the BRA began terrorizing villages, causing local militias to form. So remember, BRA is Francis Ona's Bougainville army, basically, and gangs associated with them began like burning villages down, pillaging people, raping people, and th- they were upset about that. They were a little, they didn't like that too. They didn't like it too much, the local Bougainvillians. And so they got pissed about that. And the local militias, armed and aided by the PNG troops, drove the BRA out of Buka, which remember, that's where the big island at. I think that's where Bougainville's main airport is at this point in time. And so they drove them out of that island. They've had enough of Bra. They've had enough of like the gangs and the Bougainville Revolutionary Army. And probably at this point, Francis Ona. They're like, yeah, his like cousin died, and he started calling himself the king, dude. What the fuck? The mine is filled with cobwebs, and this guy's running around calling himself the king while we get like raped to death. Get the fuck out of here. And so BRA got driven out of the second biggest island, Buka. And so other villages on Bougainville Island, they did the same thing. They were like, get the fuck out of here. And I imagine the resistance wasn't too great at this point. And this is still like the 1990 when the war wasn't that big. And this is the actual Civil War itself. This is the actual Bougainville people fighting other Bougainville people. It's basically local militias armed and like aided by Papua New Guinea troops fighting the Bougainville Revolutionary Army, which is just that must have fucking sucked, dude. If you were just like a regular dude in the Bougainville Revolutionary Army, you're like, fuck yeah, dude, we're gonna free our country and we're gonna be rich as hell. And then all the other people are like, no, you're not, dude. No, you're not. That must have sucked ass. That must have sucked so hard. And so the local militias are fighting the Bougainville Revolutionary Army. And in 1992, Pius Wingti became the prime minister of PNG and declared a hardline stance against BRE. He quickly angered the Solomon Islands after a raid on rebel camps in their territory. And so remember, like I said, Bougainville is like just north of the Solomon Islands. And so they had like a few little camps there where they were like arming people and training people. And the prime minister of Papua New Guinea went into these camps that were technically in the Solomon Islands and like killed these dudes and like, burned their shit to the ground and shit. So eventually he took Arawa, which was the provincial capital, and like I said, the biggest city in Bougainville. So he's doing pretty decent. He's not doing half bad at this point. He did fuck up those camps and he pissed off the Solomon Islands a little bit, but he's like, we're Papua New Guinea, dude. We rule this region. We rule Melanesia. And I'm sure that's the mindset he had. I'm sure he didn't actually say that, but that's what I would have been like. Dude, my swag is too tough, dude. You guys don't know about this PNG swag. We got it. We got it going the fuck on. And so he's doing pretty good. And about the same time, Foreign Minister Julius Chan tried to form a peacekeeping force with other nearby island nations, but failed. He tried to form like a greater Pacific peacekeeping force to like just calm the situation down in Bougainville. That was Julius Chan's thing. And Julius Chan, not Asian, not Chinese at all. He's just he's like a Papua New Guinea dude, just like a black dude who doesn't really look that much like a black dude. Yeah, I thought he was Asian. I thought he was like Chinese or something 100%. Like I was skipping around the article being like, oh, should I write this down? Should I put this part in this part? And I just saw the name Chan and I was like, oh, the Chinese got involved in this? No, Julius Chan, he's just a regular dude. And he was the Papua New Guinea, I guess, greater foreign minister. I think the American equivalent of that is the Secretary of State. And so this guy's basically the Secretary of State of Papua New Guinea, which I think is third from the president. I think it goes president, vice president, and then secretary of state. So this dude is pretty powerful within PNG. And so eventually Chan replaced Wing Ti, who was the former prime minister, as prime minister and tried peacekeeping talks, but Big refused to participate. And at the same time, when Chan replaced Wing Ti as the prime minister, these other guys tried to do a coup in Port Moresby so that they could take over. And Chan was having none of that, dude. And Chan is like a nice dad. Chan is like, I'm just gonna let we just got to talk to these kids. We just got to appeal to them. And that switches up pretty quick. And so after this, Chan was like, "All right, you don't want to negotiate this. We're just gonna start fucking you guys up." And so he began raids against Big Big Bougainville interim government. Sorry, I just something about me is like I have to clear it up every time I say it, even though I know you know. He began raiding their homes, which in and out of the country, and had Jerry Singarock invade Bougainville. So the blockade ended, and he was like, "Fuck this! You just go in and kill as many of these people as possible. I'm done being the nice guy. They wouldn't even come to negotiate with me. We're just gonna fuck them up." And the reason that the Bougainville interim government slash Bougainville Revolutionary Army didn't go in to negotiate with them because they were just like, yeah, you guys are just gonna kill us if we show up. Which fair point. I do see their point in that one. Obviously, these people don't like you at all, so I can't blame them for being like, yeah, you guys are just gonna kill us, so no, we're not gonna negotiate with you. But I do think Chan offered to negotiate within Bougainville. So I don't know. I think Big is in the wrong here at this point. I think everyone can kind of agree Francis Ona is just out of his fucking mind, and Big and Bra are in the wrong. And so Chan attempted to hire Sandline mercenaries to retake Bougainville, but this kind of failed. And so Sandline is a mercenary company. I think it's based in Australia or New Zealand. Maybe it's Britain, or maybe it's South Africa. It might be South Africa. That's where a lot of big mercenary companies come from. And he was trying to get them to like fight on his side. And like obviously they're mercenaries, so you have to give them money to fight on your side. Uh, and I think at some point he did, but his big invasion into Bougainville, he did not have the Sandline mercenaries on his side. I didn't go too deeply into the Sandline affair, which is what it was called. So he failed that, but eventually Bougainville was given autonomy after negotiations with political and tribal leaders. So they just completely abandoned negotiations with Bra and Big because they were like, Francis Owen, that guy's just insane, dude. He's calling himself the king. This island has never had a king before. What the fuck is he talking about? So they just stopped negotiating with him, and they just basically went straight to the source. They went to the Bougainville political leaders and the tribal leaders. And so that's how the war ended. And I think estimates are about like 20 to 30,000 people died in about a 10-year conflict during this war. The war, depending on who you ask, either went from 1989 to 1998 or 1988 until 2000. So basically, split the difference, call that a 10-year period. About 30,000 people within Bougainville died. Some people, I saw this estimate that was like 1 to 2,000 people died, and I was like, well, which is this? This isn't. We're not talking like 10,000 versus 11,000. This is either 30,000 or 1,000. Like what? What are we doing here, guys? So I'm gonna go with 30,000. This did seem like a pretty big deal. I'm just going based purely off vibes with that one, dude. No backup data, no points, no graphs, nothing. Just purely vibes. And so now we go on. Things are pretty peaceful in Bougainville. Obviously, the mine still doesn't operate to this day. It's just kind of laying there, but it's still all the copper, all the ore is there. The mine's ready to go. But I think Bougainville is just refusing to let anyone use it until they can use it for their benefit, which, once again, you can't blame them for that. They're just trying to like do what's best for their autonomous region, their country. But in 2019, the 2019 referendum. So in 2019, Bougainville residents voted in 98% favor for independence. And independence was originally supposed to come in 2025, but this year it was pushed to 2027 by Bougainville leaders. So it wasn't Papua New Guinea. It was like, you guys are going to have to wait until 2027. It was people within Bougainville being like, we're not ready for the setup, which, hey, shout out to them, because that takes a pair of balls to be like, that takes, some real courage to be like, no, we're not ready yet. We're just not ready to be our own country yet. But yeah, that's Bougainville. That's the Civil War. They're still not free. They want to be free. They're kind of their own thing. They're not really that much like Papua New Guinea other than their skin color. They don't have like the same tribal divisions. Like the tribes they're pretty intermixed, and they speak a lot of the same. Like the only difference between the tribes, it's not like genetic or like cultural, really. It's kind of just they don't speak the same language, and so they're kind of chilling with each other. It's not like Papua New Guinea. So that's what's going on in Bougainville. If you're from Bougainville, I think I might post this. If there is a Bougainville subreddit, I might post this on Bougainville, the Bougainville subreddit, to see if I can like talk to a dude from there, just to be like, what's going on in what's going on in Bougainville? Tell me about this. Maybe like a veteran of the war or something like that. I think that might be sick. So I might do that. That would be very cool as like a interview for a podcast. But I don't know. I don't know if we're gonna be able to do that. These guys, they speak pidgin, which is kind of like Jamaican patois, where it's like I can kind of understand what you're saying, but you're just putting words together in the wrong way. What's going on here? So that's what's going on in Bougainville. Hope they get their independence, and I hope they get that mine up and running, dude. I'm telling you, look up Bougainville. It's very, very beautiful. It's a beautiful tropical island. It's like, you know how Dubai and shit is like in the middle of the desert? Imagine if it was on a tropical island. That's what Bougainville could do. They really could do that. But yeah, that's all I got for Bougainville. Yeah, trying to think what else is going on, dude. Trump's doing some shit, but that's current events. We'll save that for current events. Nothing's going on in my life. Dog died. Dead as hell, dude. She is very, very dead. So I hope you guys have a good day, good week, good year. I hope if your dog dies, it's at least in a funny way. And I'll see you guys on Wednesday or Thursday. I haven't decided. Ooh, and I might do a top 5. Maybe not tomorrow. I might do back-to-back episodes on Wednesday and Thursday. I might do Thursday is going to be current events, and then Wednesday I'm going to do my top 5 ranking, or maybe top 10. I can't decide yet. But yeah, I don't know. Look out for it. It's coming up. Yeah, I hope you have a good day, good week, good year, good life, and I'll see you guys then. Peace out.